Welcome to your session with Callum Hancock. He'll be taking you through his phenomenal glow up from man who never handed in his assessments to flight designer on one of the UK's biggest active game projects. Please use the chat function to ask any questions to Chris. Chris is going to pass them. There's a little Q&A button down there. He's going to take out anything about Pokemon, 1970s Italian horror movies, or Confetti X, but anything that's relevant to Cal's work is going to be something we're going to want to hear. Hopefully you'll enjoy today's session. Thank you, Cal, for taking time out from a very busy schedule. He literally, 10 minutes before we called him, was actually still working to speak with us for our 15th Confetti Industry Week. Cal is an Industry Week veteran. His first appearance, we've confirmed, was at Industry Week 9 as a student in 2015, so he's an old hand at this. Don't forget, you can still book on to any upcoming events on the Industry Week website. That's iw.confetti.ac.uk. Make sure you sign up using your Confetti or NTU email address. Those are the only ones that actually work. As part of Industry Week, we're running a competition where you can win some prizes. All you have to do is tag us on Twitter and Instagram, hashtag IW21. Share your experiences throughout the week. Once Cal's finished, we'll do some quick questions from you guys. I say Chris is going to be collecting those. Then we'll have a short debrief from Cal once you guys have left. So I'll now hand over to Cal. Take it away.
Cool. Cheers, Kyle. Thanks. Yeah. Hi, everyone. How you doing today? Hope you're doing all right. Let me just start sharing my screen. Can everyone see this okay? Just switch back to me. So today I'm sort of going to be giving you a bit of a talk, sort of going over my sort of journey into the games industry, sort of how I got there, what it was like for me, and sort of hopefully you can all take a little bit of advice, sort of like advice or inspiration. So hopefully you just sort of get something from it. So getting into it. Who am I? Sort of like, why should you listen to what I'm saying? Well, like Kyle was sort of going over, I'm Callum. I was at Confetti for 4 years. My first Industry Week was Industry Week 9 back in like 2015. I spent 2 years on the Confetti College course, going on to then do 2 additional years on the university course. I graduated back in 2018 from the games course, and that was it. And then I went straight on to working at Cloud Imperium. So this is my studio guys. I haven't actually seen them like in person for ages, but you can see me over there to the left. I put like a little green arrow on myself. That was us just a few years ago. We're sort of working on 2 big games right now. You might have heard of them at some point. The biggest one that you might come across is Star Citizen. So it's like a big online MMO. It's still in active development. It's been going on for something like 5 or 6 years. It's getting there. You can play it right now. It's quite popular. Then the other sort of project we're working on is a little bit more behind the scenes, sort of like closed door stuff. It's the single player game, Squadron 42. That's personally what I'm working on nowadays. It's going really well, but that's a bit more sort of behind closed doors. Since working at the company, I've been really, really lucky. I've had the sort of chance to work on both of these projects, and my sort of roles changed completely while working on all of them. So when I started, I sort of started working on Star Citizen straight out of university. I started just straight onto as a junior designer. My role at the time, it was really, really diverse. I was sort of on the live design team at the time. What that sort of means is it wasn't just sort of designing levels. I bounced between like a lot of different things. So like one day I might be scripting logic in the mission modules to sort of make those works. Other days I might be designing how a planet looks. And then another day I might be building a space station. Like it was really, really amazing. Like it was really diverse work every single day. It was something completely new. And I had the really lucky opportunity to work on that for just about 6 or 7 months. So after that, after a certain amount of time, it's really, really good. But then one day the Squadron 42 design team came to us and sort of selected a few of us to just sort of come work on that. At first, it was the same sort of thing, but eventually sort of I got rolled into the flight design team. I'm still with them at the minute. I've been with them now for something like 2.5 years or something like that. We handle all of the sort of like space flight sections of the game. So anything that's sort of like you're in a ship or you're in space or you're traversing in some kind of vehicle, that's the sort of stuff that we handle. I make up about 20% of the team at the moment working on the space gameplay stuff. And I sort of own between about 3 or 4 different chapters of the game, and I handle a bunch of like the systemic features in the game, like big global mechanics. In my time sort of working on Squadron, I got promoted from being a junior, then onto a regular designer, and then more recently, I've sort of like progressed into a sort of semi like senior type role. So I sort of bring on some of the more junior designers, help train them up, manage the team a little bit more. That's sort of like my day to day. Yeah, my sort of more day to day exactly responsibilities is basically working with all the other directors, working with all the other departments, and just sort of like banging out each of the chapters of the game. So I hope you all understand, I really can't show too much stuff from the game. It's all very, very behind the scenes. I can show you a few little things that we've had like shown off to the public, but you know, just for clarity, this isn't behind the scenes. This is just like everything I've snipped out of YouTube videos and whatnot. So this one here, this big environment on the screen, I spent a long time working on this. This was a massive sort of effort between all the departments, design, VFX, art teams, all the directors. It's probably my most proud thing I've made from scratch, with everyone that's been shared with people so far. It is coming together really well. Here's some more sort of shots from the same sort of area of the game. Again, this is just some sort of from like YouTube videos. I can't get you like really nice shots, but this is just what I'm allowed to show. And this has like been a big cross like department between design, art, VFX for months now. Again, here's just a few more shots of the stuff I've personally built. So everything here, all the different screenshots and sections of the game, is what I built, designed, and sort of implemented from the ground up. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, this is what the game looks like at the minute. This was a teaser from quite recently. Please, someone let me know if you can't hear the audio. It's not super important, but you'll get it in a sec. It's quiet right now. It'll come on in a sec. Okay, awesome. So hopefully, if you've never sort of seen the games before, that'll give you a little bit of an idea of what we sort of get onto day to day, give you a bit of an idea of the feel for it. I'm really, really lucky to work with some like really talented, amazing artists, VFX artists and designers and everything. So that's my day to day. But alongside my main work at CIG, I also try to sort of keep up work on personal projects. My last project I was working on, I sort of showed it off at a handful of conventions over the past few years since I've been working with CIG. The most stressful one so far has been EGX. It's great. It's really amazing, like really good fun. If any of you have ever been to the convention, it's amazing fun, but ever try hosting it and it's just so stressful. I try not to sort of like let it consume all my free time, all this like sort of side work, but it's really, really good for sort of keeping up with your productivity. So that's sort of like what I get on with today professionally and sort of slightly less professionally. But I sort of wanted to go over how did I get my start and where how to get here. Like I already mentioned, I managed to get my start through the games industry working at Confetti. Okay, I just sort of want to start like before giving the overview. This is just sort of an overview of how things worked out for me. If you got sort of like a slightly different plan or like a path in mind of how it's going to work out for you, just because my story is going to be different, doesn't mean whatever you've got in mind's like invalid. You could sort of ask 100 different people who have managed to get their way into the games industry, and each one's going to give you a different answer on how they got there. So this is just sort of me giving you a taste of how I got there, and hopefully inspiring you and maybe giving you a little bit of advice, but don't think it's the only way that you have to do this. So yeah, just like all yourselves, I sort of attended my first industry week, like Carl mentioned, back in 2015. If I was to have sort of been there in the audience watching myself now, I wouldn't have sort of had any idea how I'd make all this. So I sort of, hopefully I can also show you all that sitting there, like we're not too different and you really can sort of make this much progress in a few years. So I started Confetti proper back in 2014. I just left school. I absolutely hated school at the time. Like it really, really sucked for me. I don't operate very well in an academic environment with tests and whatnot. I got really decent grades, but I never really did anything better than like passing grades, anything like that. I never did more than was really just asked of me. But I sort of went on to sort of do Confetti, which was something hopefully I thought was going to be something I loved and I could sort of maybe try to invest myself in it properly. When I first got here, like probably a lot of yourselves, I really had no idea how to make games. I'd never sort of practiced, I'd never tried or anything, but I just sort of felt like it was a good place to sort of get my start. I had like a lot of friends whose brothers and whatnot had sort of gone to the college, said it was amazing, facilities were fantastic, like great people. I thought it was where I needed to start. Even back at the start, when I first started at Confetti, I had a little bit of an idea that if I wanted to stand out, I needed to sort of try to get a little bit more involved than just sort of doing the bare minimum like I did when I was at school. So I sort of tried to sort of apply myself as much as possible, really get to grips with the engines and the sort of tools we was using, and trying to sort of get decent grades, decent like marks on my assignments. And I tried to sort of get involved where I could with sort of extracurricular activities. In the same year, 2014, 2015, I got my start sort of helping out Kyle, testing some games for Mantic. It was amazing fun. And like at the time, it was an amazing experience getting to be exposed to people who sort of like work with games and sort of not make it feel so alien and different. And then because of the, sort of like those experiences back then, I ended up going on to help Kyle out with EVNT, and I did that for years afterwards. It was amazing. As you can see here, it's like an old picture of me with Kyle. So getting involved with sort of the events and everything was great, and I sort of wanted to do more than the bare minimum. So for me as well, and you should probably try and think of the same way, now you're in higher education, you really probably should think about doing just a little bit more than like the bare minimum that's given to you on your assignments. Like I was sort of mentioning in the previous slide, I was the sort of kid who always did like the very, very bare minimum. If I was told to sort of get on with something, I'd do it, but absolutely nothing more. But if you was like that as well, and like I say, I was like that, you should probably start to think about changing that now that you're studying something you really love. I mean, like, if you get your bare minimum grades, right, like I got a few passes on my assignments, it'll be fine. it's not like a fail, but what you got to remember is at the end of the day, once you've like finished up college or you finished up university, no one's going to be sort of like scrambling to get like pass grade students. You sort of got to be a little bit ahead of that if you actually want anyone to sort of pay attention to you, and sort of like they're not going to be coming after pass students when there's like plenty of top mark students that could go in after. For me as well, like I tried sort of learning, well, as well as sort of getting involved, I wanted to sort of try my hand at more of like the sort of game development tool sets. So at the time in university, at college, I started to learn like a few different things. I don't know if you guys still use Unreal Engine. That's what we used at the time. Alongside that, I tried my hand at starting to get to grips with Unity Engine. I think it's really, really important from like an early stage, you guys get comfortable with the idea of like migrating to new tool sets or new engines or new things like that. You sort of time in college and even going on to uni, it's like really, really easy to become reliant on your sort of tool set. You know, you really like your familiar ones, like your Unreal Engine, Photoshop, Premiere Pro, things like that. And sure, like you might be great at them, like you might be great at Unreal Engine, but you've got to sort of remind yourself that like, what if I'm going to go work in like a studio and they just don't use Unreal Engine, they use Unity. Like you could sort of say to yourself, okay, well, I'm going to want to work at Sumo Digital. They use like the Unreal Engine. That's going to be fine. The problem is when you sort of get there, you're going to find that they have like a lot of in-house tools, things that you've got like absolutely no way of learning before you get there. Don't get me wrong. Like when you get to these companies, when you eventually get yourself jobs, there's going to be onboarding. They're going to make sure you're comfortable. Like don't stress yourself out about things like that. But what I'm trying to say is you need to sort of get comfortable from the get-go of like being able to migrate your tool sets, being able to sort of like learn new things and not get too comfortable just with like your reliables. Don't get me too wrong. I'm not also trying to say like spread yourself too thin. You should try and get yourself familiar with other tool sets like Unity Engine or the video editing programs or whatever you're going to need to use in your day-to-day time, C++ or C#. But then also you should try and focus your energy just on one. So get familiar with learning new things, but focus your energy just on one of them. So for me personally, even now today, even when I'm doing design work at Cloud Imperium, I still see a lot of the work through the engines at like the lens of things like Unreal Engine. Like we'll get a new function and it'll be like some name, and I think to myself, okay, well I can understand what this is because I've seen something similar in Unity and Unreal Engine, so I can understand what these new things are. You'll sort of learn the more you get to grips with like new things and getting comfortable. Fundamentally, a lot of them are the same, but the sort of like more you sort of apply yourself to them, the more that's just going to become obvious. One sec. So that's really all I can sort of mention for my first year of college. I tried to sort of get involved. I tried to sort of do good grades and whatnot, but looking back on it, that's all I can sort of say about it right now. It was going well, I was having fun, but like one entire year of my time at college have already flown by this point, and looking back on it now, this is all I can sort of mention for it. I sort of had to ask myself, what do I have to show for my work? I had sort of like I say, I got involved, but you know, I didn't really have anything to show. And what you got to remember is the same is probably going to happen to you when you're there. Like before you know it, your final years are going to be over. Like you're going to finish the first year of college, you're going to finish the second year of college, and it's just totally going to blow by. Obviously, I can't expect you all to sort of like min-max everything you're doing in your lives and sort of like, you know, focus dead hard on your work and then just sort of have no life at all. But what I'm saying is if you're sort of sitting there now thinking you've got things, like you're saying, oh, I'll do it later, or like, oh, I'll have time for it later, you're always going to have that sort of feeling at the back of your mind. That kind of feeling just doesn't go away. You've sort of got to recognize that even when you come into the end of your first year or the end of your second year, when it's all coming to an end, you're still going to be feeling like, I've just got more time to do this, when you really don't. You should, what I'm trying to say is like, if you've got more stuff you want to be working on, some like cool idea or like extracurricular projects or like something really cool you want to show off to show people, you should really, like, the best time to start is now. Like, you should get on with it, because you never really do just sort of like have as much time to get on with these things as you think. I mean, like, I've been there. You know, the days are counting down, you got an assignment to hand in or whatever is coming up. You feel like you got loads of time and, you know, you're going to get it done, handed in on time. Before you know it, you're sort of pulling all-nighters the night before you're handing in the work, and you've just blown it. You've blown all the time. You don't want to be sort of getting into that same kind of position with your portfolio work and the stuff that you want to be really proud of to show people. Like, you really should be giving yourself time for this, and like considering how precious this time is. Hang on. And like I say, I've sort of already mentioned it, but I want you to sort of think about, you know, once you're at the end of your years, what are you going to have to show for it? That's not supposed to be a dig or anything like that. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, you know, you're not getting anything to show, but I'm sure you're great students and everything. But I really want you to think, like, what tangible things are you going to have to show when you get to the end of this? Like, not just like, oh, I know how to do this, or I picked up these skills, some physical piece of work or a video or a demonstration that you could pick up, show someone else and sort of say, I made this, I know how to do this. Like, you shouldn't be in the sort of same position I was at the end of my first year. So yeah, like I mentioned, didn't have a lot to sort of show for my first year, but I was really going to try and make an effort and get something together on the second year of university. The biggest thing that sort of had me excited for my year 2 was the FMP. I'm not sure if you guys still do that now, but essentially it was the first major project. It was like an amazing opportunity to get some proper good portfolio work done during college hours. I did sort of still carry on getting involved in the same way I did on my first year. I carried on learning Unity. I carried on helping out Kyle with extracurricular things if I could, but I really sort of tried to lean my time and my effort into the first major project. So at the time, both me and my teammate Kyle, we proper just tried to give it our all. At the time as well, the work, you can sort of see a quick screenshot there, and it doesn't look that amazing. But at the time, we thought this was our best work. This was our best idea. And I think it's important that all of you lot now as well, try to do the best work you can do right now. Like, try not to save your best work that you have at the back of your mind for the future. You should really, like, at your time when you're at college or university, you should apply this time to make whatever that like amazing idea is that you've got at the back of your mind. The thing is, like, assuming it's a good idea, like, sure, it might be like good for the market right now when you think it up in your mind, like, oh, it's going to be some crazy, I don't know, RTS thing that you think people are going to love. But the thing is, by the time, if you're saving these things, by the time you can actually like have the skills to make them, like in the future, if that's when you're holding them for, the markets are going to have moved on, people might not be interested anymore. But at the end of the day, like, the most important thing is you're probably going to get there and realize I could have made something better, or like with these skills that you develop, you're going to have better ideas come down the line. So you really shouldn't like sort of hold off. You should make like your best idea today. So again, like, just pointing to the screen, our idea was lacking, but it really was the sort of best thing we could do at the time, and I really was proud of it. The fact that we was passionate about what we were doing, really, and we loved it, it really just sort of drove us to work on it. That's sort of what made us get really inspired about it. You've got to have a lot of like love for what you're getting on with, and you've got to find it fun if you're going to sort of be putting in the amount of time you're all probably going to need to put into this work. Like, that's not just for college or uni, but that's just sort of work in general. Like, the amount of hours in the creative industry you've got to put into this stuff, like, there's no point doing it, like forcing yourself to do it. You've got to enjoy every little bit of it. So I'm just going to play you these real few clips. So on the left, it's quite silly in retrospect, like looking back on these, but as a part of our assignment, we needed to make Foley sounds. So me and Kyle, we went to the woods for an afternoon. Oops. Went to the woods for the afternoon, just swung some sticks, a whole bunch of things. We trying to make like chopping wood, and was making like village workshop sounds at the time, and some sword fight stuff. And looking at this, it's silly, but we was getting on with some really, really good work there. Like it's not, AAA quality, but we was making some great sound effects. Things were good, were coming out of it, and we had like a fun afternoon of doing this. Like we really, really love this stuff, and you shouldn't just sort of think that if you're going to be doing this, it has to be like the most serious thing ever. You can have like a silly afternoon with your mates and still make good stuff. So just moving on to the right again. Here's a quick demonstration of what the game looked like at the time, with some of those sort of sound effects placed in. Again, like this is, looking back, I think this is poor, but at the time we were really, really proud of what we could get done. And that's how you're probably going to feel as well. Like if you're saving these amazing ideas for later on, looking back, you're probably going to think they weren't quite as good as you thought it was going to be. So you might as well just sort of put your all in, like, right now. Have I missed something? Okay, so hang on. As a sort of like an understanding with our FMP project, we sort of got told that the best few projects from the bunch were sort of going to get shown off at the NBA. Now, the National Video Game Arcade, it's not there anymore. It used to be on Hockley. It was a really, really awesome place. Basically, it was just a big museum for sort of games. A lot of cool people came. It was awesome. And we sort of had this goal in mind of being like, okay, if we really, really put our effort in, we're going to get the opportunity to sort of like share this with people. And sort of having that clear end goal in mind really helped us to sort of stay focused on what we was doing. In the end of it, we ended up sort of managing to get picked for the sort of like project showcases. We were able to spend just a couple of days over the weekend sort of showcasing our project work there. And for me and both Kyle, it was like a really amazing experience. Like it was really important to us. Even though we were showing it off to the public, no one incredibly important came. No bigwig sort of like industry professionals came in, took our names and offered us a job. If anything, it was just like some strangers and stuff, and our mums and our brothers just turned up. But the really, really important thing to us at the time was the sort of gratification of it. We really just both loved the idea of being able to sort of share what we had made and like created with people, and just sort of put it in front of them and just sort of, I don't know, watch them interact with it, right? Like it was the gratification of seeing someone try out our work. The entire experience for us was a combination of sort of doing things for our CV, adding to our portfolios, and sort of truly having like a good time as mates. I can't sort of like stress enough how much it is important to sort of enjoy what you're doing when you're making this. If you want to sort of make it in games, you're going to end up spending a lot of time working on them. Like, I know how it is. Sometimes when you're in class, you can be like in a workshop or a long one, and it's dragging on for an hour or two, and you're just starting to lose focus, right? Like, that's what I used to be like sometimes. Or like you get home and then just some weeks you can't do more than like a few hours of work at home, right? Like, I get that. But what you've got to remember is if you're going to get a proper job, a full-time one, like make this your full career, you're going to be spending some 40 hours a week, every single week for years doing this stuff. And that's sort of not taking into account things you might be doing in your sort of free time or overtime. I'm not trying to sort of do some lame stuff. It's like saying like, oh, you should love work. You should make like work what you love. But at the very least, what I'm saying is if you think this is what's in your future, you've got to be in it for more than just the paycheck. You've got to be doing it because you enjoy it and you really get something out of it. But yeah, if you're making stuff, please just try to share it with people. You don't have to be sort of like forwarding your projects that you're working on right now to sort of like game design superstars or like bigwigs. But at the very least, try to make sure you share what you're doing with someone, like a sibling, your mom, your dad, your brother, your mates, whoever. And someone who's just sort of going to look at the work as it's coming along and say, hey, mate, that's a good job. You're doing well, and get that sort of like self-worth and sort of gratification for what you're doing. For me, the FMP, that's what that was for me. I was a really shy person, still am sometimes, but it was my first chance to sort of, get that kind of gratification, and it sort of really helped spark a passion in me. And then that's it again. Incredible, half-assed time flies. This was the end of my second year, the end of university for me. Sorry, end of college for me. And I sort of had to stop and ask myself again, what do I have to show for this? Like really, in my 2 years at college, my entire time, what can I sort of point at and say I've made? Everything I've shown off to you, like all of you right now, that's everything I managed to produce in, if you're all at college, that's more, I've spent more time on this stuff than all of you have combined so far in higher education. And it's not much, is it? And I just want you lot to consider, if the roles were reversed and you were standing up here right now, do you think you lot could sort of show off the same body of work or like the same amount of work? I mean, what I'm trying to say is like, just be really mindful of when it all comes to an end, that you've actually got stuff to be proud of and to show off and share with people. So for me, I did carry on getting good grades. I carried on like learning new programs and getting involved in extracurricular stuff. But really, it really just kind of felt like, other than a few extra lines on my CV, I didn't have loads. I had the FMP, and it was an amazing experience. I really, really enjoyed it. But I don't think, looking back on it, I was proud enough to sort of put it in my portfolio, my portfolio, and sort of demonstrate to people, saying, this is the best work that I'm capable of. College was over, and this was everything I had to sort of put in a show reel to say, this is me. And I really wasn't impressed with everything I've made. One sec. I just sort of want to mention again, like, I'm going through the steps that I took right now. This is just sort of how it happened to work out for me. I managed to get there in the end, but I just want you to all understand that, like, I didn't do a perfect job. I could have done some things better. I made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, but I just want you lot to sort of take some like inspiration from this, and then also from some of the things that I'm saying. Like, I wish I made something prouder further on, or earlier on, and everything. Like, I want you lot to try and like learn from some of those mistakes as well. So now that college was at an end, I had decided I was going on to university. So I decided to sort of try and commit myself to creating like some more portfolio work, sort of like using all the skills that I learned during college. I felt a lot more confident now. I wanted to try and sort of make something over the summer that I was going to be like really, really proud of. I had 3 months to get on with it. So like a really decent chunk of time. And at the end of it, my sort of goal that I wanted to keep in mind was this time was, I want to be able to put together a portfolio and have something I'm really proud of here. When I say something like that, and when I sort of say everything I've been saying so far, it sounds like some of these decisions I've been making about like, oh, I wanted to get on the ball, I want to get this together, I want to get that together. It sounds like it might have been made out of maturity or like a sense of seriousness or whatever you. That was it for some of it. I was trying to be serious. But for me personally, what motivated me the most to get on with the stuff was like anxiety and fear about the future. I was sort of scared about the idea of failing and not being able to like do this as my career and like do this into the future. I don't know about you lot. I tried a few other jobs. I wasn't very good at it at all. I really don't think I could do anything but games. And if you feel the same way, you don't want to be in the position where you're sort of thinking, shit, am I going to have like a future of this? Because I don't know, it's terrifying. And personally, that's what got me my arse into gear to get on with this stuff. What I'm trying to say is it shouldn't really matter what your motivating factor is. It's just like whatever gets you going, try to sort of take that and put that into something productive. Try to sort of change it and sort of like, okay, I'm anxious and that's like a shitty feeling, but try and take that and turn it into something positive. Like, okay, well, I was anxious, but at least I've used that kind of like fear and energy to make something that's going to benefit my future. Maybe it's you want to prove to your sort of brothers and parents that you're sort of better than they think you are. You might want to sort of prove to old teachers and stuff that you weren't like a lazy kid or what have you. It doesn't matter what it is, just sort of try to channel it into sort of making things better now. To some extent, that was me. I wanted to sort of prove that I was worth it, and I really wanted to sort of, put these feelings to paper. So for my plan, I wanted to create an environment starting with sort of like, I started with the sketches and sort of these environment pieces. I tried to play to the strengths that I knew I had. and I tried to sort of keep the scale of my and the scope of my work constrained in a constructive way. So for me, I came up with the idea of these floating islands that I was going to 3D model and sort of turn into like a bit of an environment piece. I wanted to sort of 3D model and sort of design out a city, but obviously on my own, I've got no way of making a massive city and making it feel good. So what I had to do was like organically come up with a concept that can keep those ideas constrained, but still sort of play to your strengths. You should always try to sort of play to your strengths, no matter what you're working on. Don't just sort of do something because you think like feel obliged to it. If you're going to do it in whatever way works best for you and your personal skill set and your strengths. You know, I mean, I've got it here saying that like a lot of the greatest innovations in games were sort of made under limitations and sort of like technological constraints. Like it really sort of helps, you know, bring out something really creative. Like another example for me personally, like, I can't model eyes to save my life. So with a lot of my personal art style, I started incorporating that in and it was like, well, how can I design 3D models without eyes? Because if I'm not very good at it, like just exclude it, right? Like it's about figuring out something that works best for you and your personal talents. I know it might sound like obvious saying that out loud, saying like, oh, just make what you're good at, but you'd be really, really surprised how often it really doesn't occur to people. Like if your strength's modeling, focus on modeling. Don't worry about programming. Don't worry about mechanics as much. If that's not what you're good at, don't worry about it. Vice versa. If you're amazing at making gameplay mechanics, don't spend hours and hours and hours stressing over making the most detailed environment, because that's not what your strengths are, and that's not what someone's going to hire you for at the end of the day. So that's what I did. I sort of focused on the environment and design and played to my strengths. For me personally, I started out with a bunch of white box geometry in sort of UE4 and Unity. I sort of switched between both the early stages. I sort of built simple geometry, like rotoscoped on top of it, took those, detailed them up again, like the picture we saw on the last slide, and then 3D modeled again on top of those, sort of like iterating it over and over again. That works for me. You're all going to sort of develop your own sort of like personal style that works best for you and your sort of personal pipeline. That's what I did. Just looking at the scene for just a second, it does look like a pretty big mess. I mean, you can see like there's all these copy pasted ships over here. There's a bunch of cubes over there. There's a bunch of like weird gray and red sort of clipping geometry. What I'm sort of trying to demonstrate is it's okay while you're working on things to be messy with this sort of stuff. Don't get me wrong, it's like a really good practice to sort of keep your work clean. But like, working on this stuff for long enough, the etiquette's going to come along. Don't stress about it too much. But right now, you should focus on sort of bashing out the work in whatever way you feel is most efficient for you. As long as you can sort of start to see the work you're intending to create coming through, you're not doing this stuff wrong. I mean, you might even be surprised, like behind the scenes, you'd be surprised just how much of even like in AAA titles, sometimes our environments can look a little bit similar to this. Sometimes, like if you've got an idea in your head and it's the first time you put in like paintbrush to paper, you're not instantly going to get a masterpiece. Video games, more than like a lot of other creative medium, it's like an incredibly iterative process. Like your Michelangelo is not going to come out overnight. You're not going to see it overnight. You're just going to take like many revisions before you start seeing this amazing work come through. So in these interim stages, when you lot are working, if you can't quite see the full picture coming together, don't stress too much, as long as like you feel like it's going in the right direction. Just sort of like bash it out in whatever way works for you and just get on with it, I think. So here, I just sort of want to show you real quick. Here's a really sort of early video project. I sort of filmed a bit. This was back in the early days when it was in Unity. I sort of want to show it off as sort of a demonstration about how important it is to sort of share what you're doing. So let me just sort of play a little bit of this. So just for a little bit of context again, this was filmed roughly in 2016, I think. So sort of get from that. It's not amazing. You know, I wouldn't recommend any of you film your work with the camera phone and, you know, share it that way. That's not a professional way to show your work. But what I'm trying to get across is, even in those early days, I think sharing your work, whatever way works best for you, if getting it in front of other people and just sort of being able to say, hey man, I made this, I think that's really, really important. If that's sort of like the quick sort of like stop and go way that you work, go for it. I just think it's really important sort of like to be able to share what you're getting on with. Like, as long as it works for you, I wouldn't say you're doing it wrong. So getting closer towards like the end of the summer, for me, I felt like a real environment was starting to come together. Like I could start to see all the pieces piecing into place. You can see in the screenshot right here, some of the assets I've worked on more of them. Like towards the left, you can sort of see the elevator and there's a bit of a pole. They're like a bit higher detail than the rest of them. But you know, the stuff behind it, some of it's still pink and some of it's still red. For me, this was like obviously it's quite a standard industry way of doing it, is to sort of like put debug textures on things to say it's not done. But this was sort of like how I developed it for myself, just sort of saying like, hey, this is labeled, I'll come back to it. The rest, this color means it's done, this color means it's work in progress. But it was very rough, but at least at this point, like I could show it to people and they could understand like, okay, this is work in progress, this is coming together. Like I can see what you're going for here, and I can start to see all the pieces sort of brush into place. So I just sort of wanted to hang on another picture for a second. I think this is like this screenshot is a really decent representation of what it's like to sort of work on something, and it sort of drives home a bunch of things. You can see that the scene's like it looks like a complete mess, like a bit like the earlier one. It's just completely unkept. There's just, you know, you can see the cubes, there's ropes, there's a sphere in the middle, there's a bunch of guys hanging around without proper textures on. But that's okay. I don't think while you lot are working, especially, you know, when you're at college and even at uni, you really shouldn't be too precious about what you're working on. You sometimes, and you know, again, especially when you're in these like really developmental phases, you should just sort of put all of this work in the pot sometimes and sort of see how it comes together, see how it works, and just sort of don't be shy to experiment with these kind of things. And I also want to sort of point out for a second, like, you know, the meme pictures that are above some of the guys. Like, sure, I know like it's kind of lame looking at some old-fashioned memes now, but I think it's personally really important. I think it's important to sort of share and demonstrate, because it doesn't come across as serious, right? It doesn't look professional, it's not serious. And I keep on sort of talking about this, but you know, I think it's important not to always take yourself too seriously. As you'll sort of see as I go further on with these slides, this project ended up sort of turning into something very serious to me. But throughout all the stages of its development, I had a lot of fun while I was making it. I think it's really important that you have fun while you make these things. Like throughout all the stages of development, you should try and sort of keep on doing little things to help you smile or have like a little laugh, or just help you enjoy what you're doing. The amount, like I've said it again, but like the amount of time you're going to sort of spend working on your portfolios and working in games, you've got to do it, otherwise you're not going to enjoy it. It might be lame looking back now, but in the end, this stuff ended up getting replaced. It never got seen again. And if this was a AAA title, these pictures would have never seen the light of day. I can tell you from experience, we have similar occurrences happening on serious big budget AAA games, and people just sort of do it sometimes to have fun. And I think it's really important, even at your stages, to sort of enjoy what you're doing. Don't stress out about being super serious all the time. Carrying on from that, it wasn't really obvious to me at the time. Like, I didn't really realize it at the moment, but for me, this period was like a really big creative spark in my life. And like, I felt like I really, really got it. I felt like, well, I knew what I needed to do. I knew where I was going. And, you know, you don't realize those kind of things until later on. Further on into the future, like going on from that point, I felt like sometimes if I'd cut more distractions out of my life, I could have just produced more art, you know, be more efficient. So if I just don't go to this party, I can get this much more work done. But in reality, that's not how it works, at least in my experience, and sort of speaking to everyone I speak to at work and in the creative industry in general. Like during the time between sort of like college and uni, I spent, like, I've showed you all this work that I got done, but I also spent a lot of time, you know, hanging out with friends. I went on nights out. I just sort of had like loads of fun in between. In the games industry and like the creative industry in general, burnout is like a serious big issue. You might not ever come across it in college, and you might never come across it in uni. Maybe even later at some point you'll come across it. But some of you, to some degree, at some point will experience some amount of burnout on your work if you sort of like stick with this long enough. Focusing just on your work without any of the hobbies or distractions in your life or anything else, it's just not going to end up well. You'll just end up hating all this. You'll just feel shit. Without sort of experiences in your life and people and things to get excited about, you'll start to lose that sort of like creative spark. You know, by all means, take my advice so far, focus on your work, get some really good stuff done and be like inspired. But you've got to also try and take this time in your life now to figure out what way of working works best for you. Figure out how to sort of do that work-life balance between like, okay, I go to all the parties and I see all my friends and I have like a really good time, but then I'm also getting really good work done at the same time. Like, you've got to get the good in between now while you've still got time. I mean, because at the end of the day, that's what the games industry is all about, right? Like, to some extent, that must be why you're all here. Like, otherwise you'll be in some stuffy job, studying something else, business or IT or something else. Like, to some extent, you all must be studying games because you think it's fun. So right now, while you're at college and university, you should take the time to sort of learn how to keep it fun. Because from experience, speaking to other people at work, people who haven't sort of like put the effort in to sort of figure out that balance, it doesn't become fun anymore. It's like just a really crap, it just becomes another job to some people. Like, you should really try and figure out that balance where you can. So going on to it, next one. I really enjoyed like the experience that I had during this sort of like that period in between college and university. It was really amazing for me. I sort of found what was made me passionate, but it all came to an end eventually, and I had to sort of go back to university. I didn't quite have the sort of stunner of a portfolio piece that I sort of wanted to get done, but I could be confident that I'd done the sort of the best work I could at the time, and I was sort of starting to see something come together from it all. I wanted to try and take that same dedication that I felt putting into the project over the summer and try to sort of keep up that momentum and that same kind of like feeling I had and apply it to the things I was doing during that next year at university. I also did sort of want to as well keep at work on the actual project itself. It's like, you know, after all that effort, why bother sort of stopping, right? So to help me sort of keep at work on the project, I used it as a foundation for a lot of the classes and lessons that we had. So when the opportunity was right, when we were in class learning some new mechanic or some new system or anything, instead of like turning up to class and sort of creating a whole new dummy project, each time I'd bring in the same project that I was working on and load it up and sort of do those tutorials inside that project. So I had it for future reference and I could use it again. Pardon me. If you can, it should be a lot easier right now, seeing as you're all sort of like working remotely. But each time you sort of turn up the lesson, try not to sort of create a demo project each time you sort of learn something new. If not one big project, then at least some other thing where you can collate them all and say like, this is everything that I've learned while I've been in class, and I can sort of demonstrate it all at once. So like, yeah, at the very least, if you are going to sort of like load up a different project every single time you go into lesson, sort of do it like that, at the very least, like, please save the work that you've been doing, like save everything, don't ever delete this stuff, because it's really important that you sort of like keep a record about what you've been working on. Because, you know, at the risk of sort of sounding a bit like a broken record, your portfolio is like really, really important. You should sort of keep your work and you should try to document it properly. Like, even if some of this smaller work that you might get on with isn't as impressive as your sort of like big showpiece or whatever like big idea you might have, at least with these smaller projects, you're able to demonstrate a wider range of more like niche skills that you definitely know. For example, I've kept like little projects I've done where I've worked with like virtual reality gear and like networking examples. They didn't look nice at all, but at least I can sort of like take those little projects and prove to someone like, hey, I can do this. Look here, look, I've done this. I know how to do this. And that's sort of like what, at the end of the day, that's what your portfolio is, right? It's proof. You could be sitting there right now and you know, and you really are like the best guy in your class, and you could be incredible at anything, right? But it's not really worth anything at the end of the day if you can't actually prove that you know how to do that stuff. You've got to try and think for a second, try to put yourself in the perspective of the person who you're trying to get hired by, right? You could be lying to them, you could be exaggerating, or anything as far as they're concerned. They're not just going to take some like stranger's word for it, right? That's not him being mean. That's not me being mean, of course. He's, you know, you can imagine that that's deal with like so many jokers and whatnot. But like, you've got to be able to demonstrate to those people, like, hey, I definitely, it's not just bluster. It's not just like words. I really do know how to do this, and I can prove it. Look, if you know something, but you can't prove it when the time comes, it, unfortunately, I know it sucks, but it's really worth as much as not knowing it at all. That's why if you really can already do something right now, you really should think about documenting it and displaying it right now. Like, early skill development is really important, and it sort of helps you to stand out from an early age. And it sort of shows that you're really good at picking things up and like learning new skills and being able to get on with it. Like, just sort of going on from that, if you sort of end up making something now and it's like a really complex mechanic or something you're proud of, and you don't end up putting that in any kind of portfolio material until 6 months from now, a year from now, when someone looks at that, as far as they're concerned, you made that then, right? In reality, you picked up those skills years and years prior, or months prior. Like, get it together now and demonstrate it now so you can prove, hey, I knew this from an early age. I'm really good at picking these things up. I found that for me personally, focusing on my attention like on one big show project was like the best idea, but sort of holding on to sort of like little demo projects was also like really key in getting all that stuff together. I found as well, again, this is what worked for me, an amazing way to sort of like really quickly build up an interesting portfolio was through game jams. Game jams are like a little get together where developers like yourself or like more like either like totally novice all the way up to like super professional, you get together any sort of skill level and you sort of like try to develop an idea together over an evening or like a day or a weekend or even a week or two. Usually there's some kind of category, there's a theme that sort of both act as sort of like a jumping point for your idea. These sort of themes restrict you, like, but it's sort of through those restrictions help you sort of come up with something interesting. For me personally, once I made a VR Tetris game where you sort of like did city planning and sort of like putting all the pieces together helped you build a city. Another game was a game a bit like The Matrix where audience and members texted like the actual people that were playing the game from their smartphones to a real number, and then those people received the numbers in games. And it was really cool. Like, those are some like little projects. They couldn't have been anything bigger than that, but it's a really cool demonstration being like, hey, I know how to do these like niche little things. What's amazing about a lot of the jams as well is that at some of them you're expected to sort of give a little short demonstration or create like a little video document, like a little video demonstration at the end of it, usually to sort of like show off to everyone else, like either in person or over the internet. So in the space of a day or a weekend or a week, you've already got like a tiny little microcosm of a showreel put together. Like, it's a really easy win. So even if like you want to be lazy about it, like I was, you can sort of take these, you know, tiny little showreel snippets and then roll them into your sort of big extra showreel to like sort of bolster it up really quick. I mean, regardless of the portfolio side of things, these jams were like a really amazing opportunity for me to meet really talented, passionate people, like just get inspired about making stuff. It was a really incredible experience to be like around that many sort of creative people who are really like enjoying just making things. I know it sounds a little bit lame, but to sort of like keep yourself driven and keep yourself like motivated about all this stuff, it really, really helps to sort of surround yourself with like-minded people who like have positive outlooks on these things and like a really positive outlook for games. Like we've all had sort of like friends who are quite optimistic about anything. You know, you tell them about something you've done, like, oh, that's great, I'm really happy for you. We've got some friends who have all been like, you know, Debbie Downers. You know, they're not the most amazing people to keep around when you're trying to stay like motivated about this stuff. And game jams, they're an amazing opportunity to meet people who are like really, really positive, really great reinforcement. People even like right now at Cloud Imperium, who have worked in the games industry for decades, still enjoy sort of taking part in these game jams. Like they're just amazing fun. Like even for all the same like reasons I've sort of described, even though I've been working in the games for years. For me, I found it wasn't just restricted to game jams, like strictly speaking. I attended a lot of hackathons as well. These are more, they're a lot like game jams, but more sort of dedicated to the computer science side of things. I wouldn't personally consider myself like a proper computer scientist, but I try not to let that intimidate me at the time. As long as you're sort of willing to learn and get involved and sort of be a team player, you would just have a good time and you'll probably learn something new. Also, try not to be off put because you can't attend these things in person at the minute. You can't see here, like all my photos here from like in-person game jams. And yeah, for me personally as a person, like being in person for these was amazing. Like that's what I really enjoyed. But the vast majority of game jams and hackathons and stuff are online only anyway. So you're really not missing out on anything. You can get involved right now in just the same way you would have years ago when I was doing it. You're not missing out. So for me, this was getting on into the first year still. Before I knew it, I'd sort of attended a half dozen or so of these jams. I'd amassed a decent little library of interesting little things on my main one. And I felt like at this point, I was starting to amass like a decent little portfolio starting to come together. I personally felt like the best way to start sort of sharing my portfolio work properly was through a website. It's something I feel like you can take and you can send it to someone. It's just a really easy link. It can just be one page, or it can be more complex than that, or it can just, you know, just easy splash page with just a few images, or more complex, loads and loads of different pages for each of the projects. It's whatever you want. But the most important part is that for whoever you're sending it to, it's really low effort, it's really low barrier to entry. It's just a link they can click on. What I think what's quite decent as well about sort of making a website is you can sort of choose your own domain if you want to sort of go down that path. So you can sort of then, even if you do want to make business cards and whatnot, you can easily stick it on a sort of a business card or any other sort of advertising you have for yourself. And, you know, that person might have that business card and they'll come across it months and months later. It doesn't matter. They can still sort of click that link and it's going to take you straight to sort of that website and your work's still going to be there fresh, right? Now, sort of going on about sharing your work. Me personally, I am quite a shy person sometimes. For me, social media stuff can sometimes be a little bit intimidating. I personally prefer to sort of accumulate everything on my website. I just sort of have to sort of like word everything at once, fill out all the contents, and then that's it, and that's it forever. Like I don't have to touch it again. But I can't underestimate how valuable it is to sort of try and share your work on social media if you can. It's really easy to get your progress in front of people. And before you know it, you've got sort of people's eyes on it, who you look up to. Like I've sort of like linked here like a few different important people who really inspired me, who ended up sort of getting in contact with me, and I ended up having like a lot of interaction with them just from sort of like sharing my work on social media. Like these people really helped to inspire me and helped me when getting on with my work. And it's really, really motivating. Having those same people that you will look up to reply to you with like, oh, hey, you know, this is good work. Like it's that same sort of gratification I was talking about earlier. Like it helps you to sort of keep your head in the game and stay motivated with what you're getting on with. And even if they're not the people who are going to end up sort of like giving you a job at the end of the day, if you make something and they like it, they might share it. And, you know, before you know it, that work might be in front of someone else. Someone else might share it again, and just sort of like spreading your work out. quite far. For like lots of eyes, you cast on a bigger net. Personally, I think I waited too long when I was at university, starting to sort of share my stuff properly on social media. I was very precious about everything I made, and I wanted it to look just absolutely perfect before I even let anyone else in. And looking back with a bit of foresight, I think that was a big mistake. While you're working, you should set sort of like mini milestones for yourself, things to share. If you leave it all the way more or less to the end, like I did, you'll find yourself sort of like struggling to actually release stuff consistently and like actually get in front of people and like have more things to talk about. If you don't already have like a Twitter account or like a LinkedIn or whatever works best for you, you should really get one. I don't like social media, but I tried to sort of view it as like more of a business tool. If you do feel the same way, like I can imagine some of you might, you should try and sort of see it in that same perspective. Like you're not really doing it for yourself. Just try to see it as like okay, I'm doing this to give myself a leg up in my career. Like, and what's important, even after I mention this stuff, like if sharing stuff on your website or sharing it in some other way works best for you, like that's fine as well. Everyone's like a little bit different, but as long as you sort of like putting yourself out there and getting stuff like your stuff together and it's working for you, like it can't be wrong. So yeah, as I was mentioning with my portfolio, I personally wrapped it up into a website. I also tried to sort of create my own brand for everything I was going to share, which was Zweihander. I wanted to create something like all my own with an image that sort of reflects the sort of, you know, ideas I wanted to give off, right? Its sort of primary goal was to sort of market me and myself and get me my first job. But the sort of branding had like a secondary purpose. In the event that I sort of didn't get a job and sort of like didn't all work out, I wanted to be able to sort of like easily switch tracks and I could carry on with the same intention, but like instead positioning it to sort of grow my own business and sort of going off on my own a bit more. Regardless of how seriously you want to take branding, I think I took it quite seriously. But even like on a more casual level where you just definitely want to get a job, it's so useful. You can use it to sort of project whatever image you want to be giving out to people, and it just sort of makes you seem so much more professional. I know it might sound like really, really obvious, but while working, try to stop and think like, what's someone going to think when they look at this? Like seriously, what would I think if I was asked to hire someone based on this material? I get to see the applications sometimes for people applying at Cloud Imperium, and you really wouldn't believe the amount of like low effort submissions we get. Some of it is like really, really good work. Like the actual contents of it is really decent, but the sort of general presentation and formatting just holds it back so much. And I know that's not fair. You know, style over substance shouldn't be the matter, but the reality of it is, imaging and style can sometimes be the difference between a team sort of saying like, okay, here's this CV. Does this go in the, you know, contact this person later pile, or does this just sort of go in the ignore pile? Because like the reality is we get so many applications, like as you can all imagine, you all want to be going into the games industry. There's plenty of other colleges and universities across the country and across Europe and the rest of the world looking at this. You're competing against so many people. And even if it is something as simple as branding, like whatever is going to help you to just sort of like stand out in front of the other guy, I think it's really important. So if it's all right with everyone, I'm just going to sort of quick run you through what my website is. So this is how it looked. I think I can keep it full screen. So right now, oh, hang on, I've unplugged my headphones. Okay, right now I sort of keep the bulk of the information on this one big page. The first thing you see straight away is my main big project. I'm going to show you some of these videos later, but this is what it looks like nowadays. I think it's really, really good. Like it's my most proud thing I've worked on. I sort of try to categorize it. So it's like the most important thing first, and then it all teeters off towards the end. So then go on to sort of talk about my experience. I started out as a junior live designer. I think that's cool. And then designing for Squadron 42. Like these are really, really easy demonstrations of my stuff. Like it's just a video. The video already looks cool. And all I have to say is, hey, I made this, like I helped make this. Just a few things I've worked on as well, like the next down thing that I'm sort of proud of, which is sort of my just QA testing for friends and stuff. And then here are my game jam titles that I was talking about before. So there's only a handful, but like it's really, really cool little projects. So like this one was a Blade Runner inspired like movie scene jam, where it was like the Voight-Kampff test from Blade Runner. That's really cool. Here's a VR 2-player game that we made. As you can see, the further down the list we get, like they're still decent, but they're just getting a bit crap. This one's really crap looking, but it's the last one on the list, right? So like someone's probably going to be impressed by that, you know, impressed, less so. And by the time, if they're not impressed by the time they get this far, they probably weren't interested. The main one I want to show you is obviously the big title. This is like, for a long time, was my main big portfolio page. A lot of high resolution pictures on here. It takes a little bit too long to load, but straight away, I sort of started with a big splash screen, lots of color, really easy to sort of take in. You don't have to read anything. Quick overview of sort of like summarizing the game. I think this part's really important if any of you lot are sort of thinking about doing a portfolio in the same sort of way. The images are way too high resolution, but it's supposed to be like a big splash screen of all the art that I've gotten on with. We'll scroll back up to this in a second once it's done. Then after someone's gone through the really easy stuff, like okay, these are really eye-catching pictures, like I'm drawn in straight away, I then go into detail about the more nitty-gritty stuff. So like, these are my most impressive mechanics. I go into a little bit of detail. It's just like bullet point, homes and friends. And then it's like, okay, here's just a quick summarization. People have their own houses and speak to the friends and stuff. And then like the further down you go, the more effort you're putting in, the less interested the stuff gets. Additional stuff, like this stuff's like really easy. It's like IKs, translation stuff, shaders, and then a bunch of portfolio stuff, just a bunch of turntables. Again, it just gets less and less interesting the further you go down, because the reality is when you share this stuff with people, you want the barrier to entry to be like as low as possible. Like you want someone to be able to jump in and just be like straight away, okay, I've like digested the information you're trying to get across to me. Like you could have the most wicked portfolio going, but if I have to sort of spend 2 hours to appreciate like the full extent of how wicked amazing it is, like there's a chance that someone reading that's just sort of gonna drift off eventually. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my sort of portfolio. I hope that sort of gives you a bit of an idea of what I was talking about. I'll just show you those images now I've loaded in. Just a really cool little like mood board of like all screenshots from the game. You can zoom in, make them bigger. I think that stuff's really important for like eye-catchiness. Okay, so for me, that was pretty much the end of my sort of first year at university. It was drawing to a close. And again, like I tried to do, like in all the other years prior, I tried to ask myself, like, you know, what did I have to show for it? If someone was to sort of turn around right now and sort of ask me for my work or my best thing, if my sort of perfect opportunity was to come along and present itself, how would I sort of react to that person today, you know, back then today? For me, this time, like an entire year working at university, it only felt about just as long as it felt working like over that summer, like the same period, but a whole another year had passed. And I think it's really important in some ways to sort of prepare right now as if your big break was coming in weeks, because at the end of the day, when you really get there, that's what it feels like. It flies by just so quickly, and before you know it, you wherever you, like the opportunity is on you before you were ready for it. For me personally, I sort of knew at this point I had sort of plenty to show for my first year at university. I had sort of my Mice on Venus project. That's the sort of big main project, what I ended up calling it. And I sort of had my big library of game jam titles. Like I think I sort of mentioned earlier, when I sort of used to be younger, like when I was at school and even like the first little bit of college, I sort of put in the bare minimum effort, but that completely had to change, like, and it had on this first year of university. And I sort of thought, getting to the end of this first year again, after I put in the dedication over the summer, and after I thought, you know what, I'm going to carry on with this for another year, I thought, well, I've come this far, I might as well put in the effort and do this again. So for another 3 months, I made the decision to sort of dedicate myself to building up the work, making it even better, and see how far I could get it in another 3 months. And just sort of as well, a big part of it was trying to get a head start on the next year of university, because it really, really helped on the first year. So I'm just going to show another quick video. At the end of it, this is what I came out with. So just skipping it along a little bit. Pardon me. So this is just like a little bit of a side-by-side. On the left is the, on the left is the same run through from this time last year. On the right is the one that I had at the end of this year of university, if that makes sense. Basically, it's a year's progress. Should be obvious which one's which. So you can see that even though there's a lot more detail on the one on the right, a lot of the core, like gray box and white box geometry is just identical. Like, not a lot, in substance, it hasn't changed that much, but obviously it completely feels different. Cool, and I think the music just keeps on going on. So that's pretty much what I managed to produce by the end of sort of like another 3 months sort of working on that over the summer. And I really, really loved the experience again, just as much as the first time around. Like, just sort of speaking for a second, not just about portfolio work or even just games in general. I think all of you at some point should really try and sort of take some time away at some point to like really, really immerse yourself in this stuff, like really immerse yourself in something you love working on and like really feel passionate about completely, just for a little bit. No other sort of like major commitments, just sort of like, so you can have like an amazing time, just sort of fully investing yourself in something. Because as you get further on in life, after sort of college is over, after university is over, it gets just much, much harder to sort of take serious amounts of time away from everything else, like in adult life, once you sort of leave education. Last time I did this talk, I sort of spoke about a friend I had at the time. He was in full-time work. He's a really, really passionate person, just like me, just like you, just like everyone else. He was really passionate about the creative games industry, but he never sort of managed to find a job, and he ended up sort of, he was just sort of working a regular job, not a games one. And he was just talking to me at the time about like struggling to sort of take the time away from that work, like stuff he needed to pay the bills, to be able to sort of like push himself forward again in the creative industry and like, change his life's direction. You lot still all have that opportunity right now in your lives. You've got years left to be able to carry on doing this. I don't, just try to make an effort not to put yourself in that same position of like dwindling the time you have right now to make like a better tomorrow for yourself, rather than sort of getting there and thinking, shit, how do I get out of this? So sort of for a second, just sort of going over everything I've sort of mentioned, it might have sounded a bit like, growing up and sort of doing all this stuff. All I ever thought about was sort of portfolio work and experience and sort of boring stuff like that. And, sure, like at the back of my mind at the time, like really being there, that was there, but it's not really all I ever thought about. I tried to take the time to immerse myself in something I was passionate about, like truly. And if you do that, you can't help but sort of create something cool, or at least interesting. I came out with good stuff because I was sort of enjoying myself and what I was doing. And at the time, it never really felt like work. It felt like just, this is what I want to do with my time. I don't expect any of you to, like, when I say 3 months I spent on this, 3 months I spent on that, I don't really expect any of you to sort of sit down for weeks or months or anything straight and sort of be able to do this. I didn't really, like, I dedicated those 3 months, let's say, but in reality it was in waves. One day I'll be on it solid, the next day I might not be on the ball. Maybe for a week I'm sort of really into this, and then for a few days I just don't even think about it. Like, but it's about giving yourself the free time to be able to develop these things. Because like, even if you sort of go into planning these things for your future with the goal in mind of doing even more, sure, if you do fall short, you'll still be able to sort of like have more work than otherwise than if you sort of end your trajectory modestly. I think as well, not only all those things, but I think it's all a really good sort of measuring stick to be able to say, like, is this something I can do for sort of years to come? Because obviously working on this stuff isn't like day-to-day work, but it puts you in that similar kind of mindset to be able to be like, could this be sort of my 9 to 6? Because if this sort of like, if going through all this and talking about all the work I've had to do sounds like too much work or too much effort, like, it is, you know, it's hard to put it exactly, but like, you know, this should be sort of like what you want to do with your time to some extent. So I carried on working on my project, you know, even after those 3 months, well into the second year of uni. By the time I shot this video, I think I was about halfway through the second year. I finally sort of got in the games environment to a point I was really like super happy with. So I recorded a fly through. For me, finishing up this video was my first sort of like legitimate piece of showreel, I think, looking back. I did have something I felt confident I could sort of show to people and send it to them and like really be proud of it. Having like a single piece of work like this, I'll show you in a sec, but like having a single piece of work like this is like an amazing tool, I think. And like even better than a website in a way, because in a couple minutes, you don't even have to sort of watch all of it. You can open it up like a busy convention where you don't have to explain anything. You don't have to introduce any of the details or like go massively into detail. You just sort of like pop the video on, play it for a minute or two, and it just all speaks for itself, I think. So it's just like a little fly through of the entire environment, a little bit more updated than the last one. There's no sound either. It's a little bit slow. Cool. I'll let it play through like just a little bit of the core of the environment. God. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit too fast now, but you get the point. Like, it gives a really decent like overview of the entire environment without sort of like having to sit down and explain the whole thing for itself, just sort of like scrubbing through it. I think you get the point. Cool. And speaking of conventions, like I mentioned on the like sort of last slide and being able to show it off, personally, I've been sort of attending them for almost a decade. I used to sort of turn up to the Nottingham Game City festivals back in the sort of like early 2010s, even when I was just like a young teenager before I even went to college. Conventions are a really nice place to sort of speak to professionals in such like a really nice, it's such a nice experience being able to sort of speak to them in like a calm, sometimes environment where you sort of like just can have like a one-to-one. Usually the best part about it, like obviously it depends from person to person, but the best part is developers usually when they're there are really happy to sort of speak to attendees like yourselves, regular people or like proper developers like yourselves. And usually sort of like as long as you're sort of like respectful and polite, they're really sort of happy to teach you a thing or two or like answer a few questions and maybe look a little bit at your work. As long as you feel it's appropriate, you know, they might be happy to look at your work, but obviously, you know, it's a mixed bag. It really is like mostly a friendly industry, games industry. Like a lot of people that work there, really quite open, really nice. I was often personally really terrified to speak to these people. I still am sometimes. But the reality is they're just normal, like you and me. They're really friendly, you know, just they've got some of the same anxieties we all have. If you do end up sort of going to conventions and sort of speaking to industry professionals and they're just a big jerk, that person's just a bad egg. Don't let that sort of like spoil the whole experience for you. I've certainly spoke to a few jerks, but that's not representative of like of the medium at large. I've made plenty of friends personally going to these conventions over the years, and I think it's important to sort of remember that in a way. When your sort of tutors and your mentors and whatnot tell you about sort of like networking, I used to sort of turn my nose up a little bit at the idea of networking. I used to sort of think of it as sort of like, shaking hands, passing around business cards and things like that. And it just sort of turned me up. It felt a bit corporate. I didn't like the idea. But in reality, making contacts and sort of like, meeting people, it is just about making friends, getting on with people, just having like a really decent connection with someone. And like, friends, quite a strong word, but you know what I mean? Like sort of hanging out, going to dinner, having a few drinks, like just sort of making new acquaintances. Because that's like really what it is at the end of the day. Like try not to sort of think of it as like a slimy business interaction. Just speaking of continuing to sort of like speak about this sort of convention and everything. Sometimes you do have to sort of be like, try to be confident, even if you're not as a person, and just try and push the boat out. When I was attending EGX, it used to be called Eurogamer Expo, on my second year of university, I was sort of like looking around at some of the projects that were there and looking at their booths and thinking sometimes, I could be doing some of this work. Like, obviously not to be arrogant, but I think some of my work was some better than some of those people's sometimes. And sometimes that's something you've got to tell yourself, right? People who actually make games, they aren't special. They're just normal, like you and me. And you can be there as well if you want to be doing it. Like, there's nothing inherently different about them. Like, they're just like me and you. So when I attended that year, I tried to be a little bit daring. I tried to push the boat out and do something I normally would be just too afraid to do. I asked if they'd be free to sort of have a booth open the sort of next year for the Res convention. That's their sort of like indie game specialized sort of convention. Pardon me. To my surprise, they didn't just sort of give me like a regular indie game booth. They gave me like a full-on regular booth, and I was totally shocked. Like, it was amazing. If I hadn't sort of taken that chance and just sort of like pushed the boat out and asked, I never would have gotten such like an amazing opportunity to sort of demonstrate my game. People I talked to, even from people at work and people today, asked me how I sort of managed to get the opportunity and really like do that. Some people sort of even now like don't seem to realize that all you have to do sometimes is just be brave and just ask. Because like in reality, whether it be like obviously asking about a booth or asking someone about looking at your portfolio or for career advice, what's the worst that could happen, right? For me personally, what's the worst? I might not have got a booth. Like, so what? There's nothing to lose, and there's loads to gain sometimes in these interactions. I know it can be scary, but you just sometimes got to put on a brave face, I guess. So just discussing that sort of interaction I had at the time, in my email, all I'd sent to them was that sort of fly around video I just sort of shown you on the previous slide, and that was just sort of like enough to convince them. So that really is sort of proof that like of what I was saying before, and that like someone can just look at a few minutes of a video like that, and it really, really is powerful. It can sort of like get the full point across in, just one easy, convenient, shareable little package. When you guys next get the opportunity to attend one of these conventions, if not EGX, then some other one in the UK, try to go in it with a sort of like similar kind of attitude. While this was sort of still going off, you just got to remember this was still nearing the end of my second year of university. This was about 3 years ago for me now. EGX had just sort of like accepted me for their booth. I was still trying to make my portfolio for the industry week that was coming up. Obviously, industry week from 3 years ago now. Industry week in a lot of ways is a little bit like a microcosm of the best bits of a convention in a lot of ways, and it's like on your doorstep because I mean you're all in Nottingham, right? I think like you're there, you get to speak to them, you get to interact with them, ask them a few questions. They're super friendly, they're super open, but rather than showing off just like their personal work they're trying to sell, they're there to just sort of answer your questions, give you feedback, give you advice, just the best bits of it. The biggest concern for me coming up at EGX was meeting Steve Austin. Steve also works at Cloud Imperium, so you can sort of see where the story's going to go. But for me, I'd never met him before at the time. Kyle grew up with Steve. Those two are mates. I've always felt comfortable sort of like showing Kyle my work. So Kyle ended up at some point sort of sharing my work and passing it on to him. And the reality is, when it comes to sort of getting your first job or like these kind of general business interactions end up being, that's how it goes, right? It's friends of friends. It's not like slimy networking. Sometimes it's like, it really is just sort of friends of friends. One friend knows like, hey, this guy's really inspired, like he's really inspired by this. I'm going to share it with other people who are really inspired about this. I mean, even today, looking towards like my next job, the interactions I've had so far are just friends recommending friends, and that's really just how it goes. Whether your stage you're at right now or even mine still going on. That being said, when you do get your opportunity, it's really important that you sort of know what you're going to do with your portfolio when you sort of get your chance to sort of spiel off your elevator pitch. You need to have a little bit of a hook. You need to be able to show someone straight away, you're grabbing their attention as immediately, like you should sort of show them off. There's no use of having like a 100-word, like the most detailed write-up you could possibly do of your sort of game, and it's like a 20-minute read, and it could be incredible, but it is no use if you're trying to grab someone's attention, right? That's not to say that people don't care. Like, obviously, people in the game industry, of course we care. The reality is just a lot of us are really, really busy, and we sort of need to mentally sort through what's worth our time. You want to sort of try and make sure that your work, when you present it to us, you want to make us think that it's worth our time to sort of go through it. And again, that's not being nasty. That's just how busy we are a lot of the time. Like I was just saying before this meeting, I finished work like 10 minutes prior. Once this meeting's over, I'm probably going to go straight back to work. Like, we're busy. So I ended up sort of meeting with Steve. I had no idea how it sort of went at the time. I sort of showed my work, but I felt like it went good. And that was that. I sort of showed him, he was gone. I wasn't sure, what to think exactly. I sort of attended a few more talks. I showed my work off during industry week. I had a few sort of other sort of industry people show interest, but I didn't hear anything back from them either. No one sort of turned around to me, even Steve at the time, and sort of pulled a contract out of his pocket and said, hey, you coming along with me. Like at the time, I was totally left wondering, and I didn't totally know what was going to happen next. And it is important to remember that, right? Even if in retrospect, a moment was your sort of big breakout moment, it might not be obvious at the moment. It might not be obvious at the time. Speaking back and forth with Steve, that went on for months with me after that. I found out later on that like he was quite impressed with it and it really had gone down well. But at the time, like it was impossible to know exactly. Hang on. Yeah, that's pretty much my point of like, it might not always be obvious like in the moment that like that was your big breakout moment. Even if you feel like it was in some respects, you shouldn't like let that make you feel complacent. You should still carry on like speaking to more people, showing your work off. Even if you think like, okay, that went really well, you still want to sort of like cast as many chances as you can, right, to sort of make it further on. So yeah, like I'm saying, for a while there, I was sort of like, I felt like I was a little bit left in the dark. I thought it would have been my moment in a way, but like, at the time, it sort of felt like it didn't work out. So I sort of thought to myself, well, what's the plan? I had my EGX booth. I was sort of going with the full sort of like dual intentions of number one, I was trying to market myself first. So I was there to network and basically show off my portfolio for 5 days to hundreds and hundreds of people. And surely there's going to be someone along those few people, that, all those people that came along that would be interested in hiring me, right? But in the back of my mind, I tried to think, okay, well, if that doesn't work out, then what happens? Well, number two intention, I was also there to sell a game, right? If nothing comes of selling myself, at least I can try and market a proper game. And then I thought to myself, well, what happens if that doesn't work out? Well, for me, I went in with a full understanding that I'd carry on for my third year of university, right? What I'm trying to say is you should have backups upon backups of backup plans. Like, I wasn't sure if I'd make it with Steve. I was sure I was going to make it with Steve, even at the time, even though I was uncertain, I thought it was going to work out. But that's not good enough. You need to have like a backup plan. If things don't go right, you need to know what you're going to be doing. Luckily, I did get my job with Steve, but I quite easily could have gone another way. I recently found out, well, a little bit ago now, but the first director who sort of like had my work put in front of him by Steve didn't have enough time to look at that work, and that could have been it for me. It just might have been like, they didn't have enough time to look at my work. It might have been didn't have the budget. It could have quite easily passed you by, and you need to be able to sort of think, okay, if this doesn't work out for me, what's going to be my plan B and my plan C? So yeah, that was sort of, you'd think that was it, right? I got the news back from Steve. It was really, really decent. I was going to come in for an interview. Job's a good one, right? Like, I've made it in a way, right? Well, the reality is, even though that's what I may have thought at the time, that's not really it. It can be disheartening to hear this, but getting noticed with your first job really is just like the first step towards actually getting the job. After that, I had to have a video interview with everyone from the studio. One of the directors rang me up and sort of on Skype, and I just spoke to them for a little bit. I hadn't been given any prep for work. It was just going to be sort of like a normal video interview with everything, everything that entails with a normal job. For me as well, and what they'll do with you, they'll give you a lot of hard questions, like really, really hard, and they're testing you, right? One of the ones that I got given on the spot was, they said to me, okay, we've got a vending machine and you want to repair it, right? Come up with 6 different missions involving repairing a vending machine. Like, that's one of the questions I got, right? The trick is, like, that sounds hard, right? I only had a few minutes to go through that, and it was literally on the spot. The trick is giving perfect answers when you get put in these positions. The trick is, you're not supposed to give perfect, well-formed answers. They're testing how you respond to some of these questions. I answered all of them, but that's just not the objective. What do you say? If you've got no idea, how do you react to that? Do you break down, or do you tackle something that you don't understand in a constructive way? They're trying to like deconstruct you in that sense. I passed, luckily, my very first stage. So at this point, I got passed along. I had my very, very first sort of preliminary interview. The next stage was to come do an in-person sort of like interview at the studio. They invited me up to Manchester for the day to sort of meet the whole team, go through sort of like, obviously I wasn't doing the actual work for the most part, but I was sitting with the team all day, figuring out what to get on with, just interacting with everyone. Because in reality, it's not just about how great of a designer you are, or a programmer, or an artist you are. It's about how you get on with the people in your team and who you work with day to day. I mean, here's an excellent demonstration of this, right? We spent in our studio about 6 months getting on board a new director. He was, proper world class, made some of the best games in the past decade, just amazing, right? But it didn't work out, and we ended up parting ways. And the reality was, because he just couldn't get on with the people on the team, he was abrasive, he was loud, he was like obnoxious. He just wasn't a team player. And you can be an amazing designer, you can be an amazing programmer, and you can be an amazing artist, but if you can't work with the people day to day, if the people you want to give you a job think you're annoying to be around, or like can't work with you, they're not going to give you the job. Like, that's the reality of it. It is incredible, but like, communication is, and being a team player, like, that's just such a big part of any job in the games industry. It doesn't matter which one you go for. Yeah, so as part of my day at the studio, they sort of gave me another big exercise, and it was just another excruciating one. They basically said, like, here's 3 pages of documentation, here's 6 locations, 5 mechanics, 3 artist things, and 2 other things. And it's like, you've got 1 hour, come up with 10 missions involving everything. And that was it. It ended up working out as something like 10 minutes apart to come up with an entire special mission, like each time around. That sounds hard. That sounded hard to me then. It sounded impossible to me then. It still sounds hard to me now. Like, and the reality is, like, you say to yourself, like, who do they expect to be able to do that? And the reality is, they don't, sort of, in a way. Like, I know they didn't. I blagged some of them. And even then, when they got back and they looked at my work that I did, they absolutely ripped it to pieces. They pulled out every little detail, found all the little problems, and just sort of like say, oh, well, how's it going to work when you do this? How's it going to work when you do that? And the reality of it is, when they're trying to get you on board, they're trying to sort of make you crack a little bit in a way. Again, people skills and being able to be like an important team player and sort of dealing with critical feedback, it's really, really important. And if you can't sort of like take the heat of someone saying like, hey, your work's not very good, like, they don't want to sort of work with you, or at the very least, like, they want you to sort of get better at being able to sort of take the heat of someone just ripping your work to pieces. So that was it for me. They were the two massive hurdles to get over to get the job. I found out I passed, I got the job. It's really, really good. And you might think, obviously, like, that's it, I've got the job, that's it for me now, like, end of the road. But I sort of still wasn't, in a way. If you want, getting your first job sort of can be the end of the road if you're like comfortable with that. But if you still want to sort of get promoted and get ahead, then you'll still want to keep on putting in like time, like to do extra things, the personal development, personal projects, things like that, alongside your work at work. Me and plenty of friends at work still keep up work on personal projects and sort of like portfolio work and game jams and things like. Some of us do contract work for companies outside of Cloud Imperium, things of that nature. Still work for TV and films, music, anything like outside of work. Not only is it sort of like great for personal development, but sort of like just like in college and university, these still help you, like these extracurricular things still help you stand out in your like day-to-day work job and help you get ahead. See, for me personally, I managed to get an early promotion as junior designer, in no small part due to the work I was doing in my own time, turning up to conventions on my own whim, flying out, doing conventions in other countries, things like that. Like, and once you get to work, like, it's not just like college anymore, not just like uni. It's not just about a pat on the back. You know, that stuff comes, it's not just recognition, it's extra money as well, which is always decent. Yeah, so you just sort of want to try, if you want to still get ahead, if you don't want to just be a junior, if you don't want to just be a QA, you're going to have to put in the extra effort. Like, otherwise you're not going to get ahead. Same as uni and same as college, the same sort of methodology goes ahead with it. But yeah, moving on to the next one. Yeah, as I was sort of mentioning, I still get involved with EGX. At the time that I've sort of been at CIG now, I've hosted my work at like the past 2 or 3 EGX conventions and a bunch of other sort of like smaller ones. I get involved with local events. I go to the Manchester sort of like indie game dev meetups and the sort of like Northwest game events. Because I've carried on getting involved, I've met new people and sort of like made more friends in the games industry. And because of that, it's sort of like opened up more possibilities and more jobs for the future. Again, what I'm trying to say is that in a lot of ways, work isn't too fundamentally different from college and university. It's always going to be, in a way, I mean, in the games industry at least, it's always going to be about what you make of it. Putting in the effort right now is going to help you just as much as putting in the effort once you've got your job. If you want it to be like this, there's never really ever a proper final finishing line if that's the way you want it to be. The same skills you could start working on right now. It's about work ethic, personal development, and sort of like self-discipline, things like that. They're going to help you, and they're going to help you get more money, going to get you more respect, your next job, whatever it is you're sort of striving for. Learning those skills early and learning them now is going to be just as useful down the road for you. This might all sound like effort, and it really is sometimes. Like, sometimes it's a little bit too much. But all of you in this room here, well, I say room, you're not really in the room, the Zoom call. Most of you, all of you here at Confetti, right? Because, you've got a passion for making things. You've got a passion for games, in particular, you'd hope. Like, you should try to be taking it. Like, you don't want to just be like, hey, I've got this job and now I can settle and it's easy for the rest of my life. Like, I imagine you all want to carry on getting involved and like still making wicked things for years to come and trying to keep that passion alive a little bit. So one final thing, I wanted to sort of show you my sort of final portfolio piece. This is my sort of like last look at the project. This was like a few months after I started at CIG, and you know, like my sort of point is showing you this. Well, I'll let it play out for a second. So yeah, this work in total, it took me roughly two years and a little bit. And sort of my point in showing you this right now is that, like, you know, that's what I made. I'm not all that different from a lot of you watching this right now. Like, we're probably less different than you think. There's no reason any of you listening right now couldn't make something similar, couldn't make something of the highest, like this sort of caliber. Like, it is totally possible for all of you. Cool. That's pretty much all she wrote. There we go. Thank you very much for your time, everyone. Skipping on to the next one. If any of you have any questions now, or like want to go over anything, yeah, feel free.
Right, am I good? Okay, so we're going to hit you with the lightning round questions, Cal. Chris has been DMing them to me as we've been going on. From Yusuf, how long do you think it takes to learn Unity at a professional level?
Okay, that's a really good question. It depends a lot on, like I was saying earlier, with learning different engines all at the same time, like if you sort of like start with 3 months of experience in Unreal Engine, it might take you ages to learn Unity Engine. If you spent a year in Unreal Engine, you may be able to jump into Unity and be like, oh, okay, I totally get this, because like fundamentally, a lot of these systems are quite similar. So, what Yusuf's worked on Unreal Engine for like at least a year now, right?
Mm-hmm.
The transition's quite a lot easier than you think. Like fundamentally, there are some differences with Unreal Engine and Unity, but I'd say go for it. It's not totally alien. The actual time for me, the transition took like 2 to 3 months to be able to like get up to proper speed. If I had to sort of say, like with that sort of, you know, working in Unreal for a year, then Unity maybe like 2 to 3 months is reasonable.
Okay. From Yasmin, how do you choose what to put into a portfolio if you always feel like your work isn't good enough?
That's a hard one, isn't it? I suppose you should always put in. I know it can be frustrating looking at the work you've got today and sort of thinking, shit, like I know I can do better than this. And sort of, you know, if you're sitting there thinking it's not good enough, you obviously think you can do better. But the reality of it is, today, whatever your best is, you should be sharing it from an early stage. Like, even if you've been working on games for 8 months, let's say, or 12 months, whatever is your best today, you should probably start sharing it right now, start sharing early, because even if it's not great, and even if you want to start filtering it out of your portfolio in years to come, at least you can just sort of show development and progression and like sort of early learning of skills. So I just sort of say, like, whatever is your best right now, even if it's not perfect, start sharing it. Like, I'm definitely not proud of everything I showed off today or even like in the past. And that answers it.
Yeah. From Josh, when it comes to starting a new project, what do you think is the most important element to begin with?
Well, with the perspective of doing a really, really big one and then stopping and then starting a new one, I'd say the biggest thing is viability. Once you figure out what's realistic for you as a person, that's the biggest element. For me, I showed you the big sort of Mice on Venus project. If I'm going through that, I've worked on that for years and years and years of my life. It's really, really good. But the reality of it is, it was too big for just me on my own. With my new project, the first thing that I went in with was thinking, okay, as a single person with these kind of deadlines, what can I feasibly get done? So for me personally, I think it's about realistic scope, I think.
Okay. And I'll make this the last one. From Tom, This is going to be the hardest one, so the others will just warm up for this. Why is it called Mice on Venus?
That's a good question. I don't have a proper answer. So I always start my projects with placeholder names. Mice on Venus is a track from C418. He's a musician. I put it in there because I thought it was really cool. And I wanted to be like, hey, Mice on Venus, that just sounds like a book title, or like just a weird sort of quirky, I don't know, it made you think a little bit. It wasn't totally obvious what it was talking about. And I wanted to make something like that. But then I'm not as creative as I thought I was. And I couldn't ever come up with something that quite matched it. So it just stuck. So that's pretty much it.
Right, fantastic. Thank you for your time, Cal. Thank you for all our attendees for tuning in. Guys, if you could get me some applause in the chat so Cal can see it. Cal, we just want to keep you on the line for some tech stuff once everybody else has gone.
Thanks, everyone.